Tonight, with our guests, we're going to share information on applying to SUNY schools, as well as private schools, and then the last presentation will be about financial aid. So we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentations. So Marcia, we would like to invite you up. Marcia is from SUNY Albany. She is the Associate Director of Admissions. So we are going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Well, hopefully you guys know where we're located. We're actually right down the road from you. One of the things that I do want to mention, I'm going to be talking primarily about the SUNY process. And you will have time, hopefully at the end, to ask any specific questions that you need to know about Albany. But before I get started, I just want to invite you all to please make an effort to stop by our campus. It's a great and welcoming place. Even if you're not really thinking about the University of Albany, which is fine, we're not going to hold that against you. I think it's always a great place to start the process. You have so many great schools right in your backyard, and before you actually go out and start looking at other schools, at least you'll have something to compare it to. So I want to invite you to do that. Basically, what I'm going to be talking about is, we had this problem before. Okay, can you guys see that? Okay, within SUNY, there are 64 campuses. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but you think about something that you want to do or study, chances are you can do it right here in New York State. Regardless of where you want to be, whether you want to be in a city, you want to be rural, there's something for each and every one of you in regards to campuses and locations. Okay, so there's also a number of different things. These slides show up very different on my laptop, but it's okay. They basically think about something that you want to do in terms of internship opportunities, study abroad programs. We have service learning opportunities, and this is something that's becoming more and more popular with universities. We want to make sure that you're not only prepared in the classroom, but you also have these hands-on experience outside the classroom. So a lot of our schools, SUNY schools, are offering those opportunities. Okay, so they're broken down into a few different categories. As you can see, there's university centers, which offers doctoral programs. We also have the university colleges, technology colleges, and the community colleges. And we'll get into a little more detail about those. University centers, which University of Albany happens to be one of those. As you can see, there's research opportunities. We offer doctoral programs. We also offer honors programs. And most of you may already know this. If you come out and support our games, we also are considered to be a Division I school. So we have Division I athletics. University colleges are usually smaller. They offer bachelor's and master's degree programs. They tend to be liberal arts. They also offer honor programs, and typically they're Division I, III schools. Technology colleges. This is where you can really have the opportunity to do bachelor's and associate's degree, but it's more applied learning. It prepares you to go out and work. They tend to be Division III schools, and those schools are also listed there. For those students who are interested now, there are, as you can see, there's schools like Cobleskill, Farmingdale and Alfred State that also offers not just associates and certificate programs, but they also offer baccalaureate programs as well. Community colleges, of which there are 30. Now, community colleges, again, I just want to say that a lot of times students think of this as their last option or the option for those students who may not have been successful, and that's not always the case. More and more, we're seeing a lot of students starting off at the two-year schools. We have agreements with Hudson Valley's Schenectady Community College, where it's just a way to save on tuition. So students may start off and they can complete a program, then just do 2 years at the two-year school and transfer right into any of our four-year programs. So that's also an option. And students have flexibility of being part-time, full-time. It's usually open enrollment, so you don't have to worry about, in most cases, the SATs and things like that. So it's not as competitive to get in. Of course, there are some programs like, for instance, Hudson Valley, where the nursing program may be very competitive. But for the most part, these schools are open enrollment. All right, now in regards to the application process, and I'm just going to be very general, I would definitely encourage you, depending on what schools you're thinking or considering, that you want to connect with those campuses to make sure that you're on the right track. SUNY is a great hub. And they have a lot of information about each individual school. I guess you guys are all using Naviance, so you can do some comparing as to what schools are looking for. But generally, we are, many of the SUNY schools are on the Common App, but SUNY have their own app as well, so either one is fine. Albany, we use both. It's a $50 fee for each campus, and you can apply to multiple campuses using one application with the SUNY app. We also look at the academic records, so you would need to submit your transcripts, any additional information. Some campuses may have specific deadlines. They may have, supplemental, and you want to make sure that you know anything that's specific to a certain campus. That's why you want to make sure you keep that relationship open with the schools that you're really applying to. Okay, in terms of the high school record, we do look at obviously your courses that you're taking. The level of courses, usually, whatever is considered the requirements to graduate from high school. Of course, when you're looking at the more competitive schools, you're going to we look at the strength of the program. So if you have an opportunity to challenge yourself, take any AP courses, honors level courses, those are obviously very favorable. And when we're reviewing your application, we like to see that. We also look at the class rank. So if the school ranks, then we'll look at that. If not, we don't penalize you for it. And I don't remember if Guilderland ranks. No. Okay, so you're all good. Regents exams, we do look at those, so please take them very seriously. I know that a lot of times, especially, you guys are juniors, but when you get up into your senior year, you're going to be taking Regents. Please take them very seriously because we do look at those. Of course, the overall GPA matters, and it depends on the school. The University of Albany, we look for like a solid B+ or better average, which ranges from an 86 to 92, and competitive SAT scores, and we are not an SAT optional school. So you will need, and most of the SUNY schools, except for the maybe two-year schools, will require an SAT score or ACT score. So you want to make sure that you take those and take them very seriously, and hopefully you'll do well. Okay, so now that we talked a lot about the benefits of going to a SUNY school and everything that is afforded to you, this is pretty much how much it will cost you. Typical tuition with room, board, and fees, about a little over $25,000. And as you can see, tuition for a two-year or the community college is a little over $4,000. So definitely bang for your buck here. And this is just a graph kind of showing you where the SUNY schools compare to out-of-state schools, private schools, so you get a sense of where costs would be. Financial aid, you'll be hearing from a financial aid expert, which I am not. But just to give you a sense of students who apply to SUNY schools, about 75% of the enrolled students receive some kind of need-based financial aid. We do have scholarships depending on the school. This is something else that you want to check with the individual campuses to see what they offer. For example, at Albany, we have a presidential scholarship for high-achieving students. And if you meet the requirement, you would automatically be offered it. So you don't have to worry about filling out a separate application. You apply to the school, you meet the requirements, and we would automatically offer it to you. So yes, most campuses do have merit-based scholarships, and we also now, the newest and most popular thing is the Excelsior Scholarship, which obviously based upon eligibility, and you guys can really check with our financial aid office about the guidelines for that. I think this might be my last slide, but I'm not sure. Well, it looks like we're going to save questions to the end. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you. So now we'd like to invite Susie Hanks, who is the Senior Associate Dean at Union College, to give you a little bit of an overview about four-year private schools.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to talk about the other 3,500 schools in the nation. So that's what my role is today. First of all, it is the opening ceremony of the Olympics tonight, and I want everyone to remember that when you're watching the luge, Tucker West is a student at Union College. So we all want Tucker West to do really well in the luge, okay? So that's your new sport to watch. Okay. So there are roughly 3,000 private or other schools in the nation. And when you're just starting out your process, you should really think broadly. Think about, as a student, who you are and what is important for you to look for in a school. Obviously, there are a lot of options in the SUNY system, as we've just learned, small, large, rural, city, and you'll find the same types of things at private institutions. And so you really want to do a little bit of soul searching even before you start the process of looking at colleges, because it will give you maybe an opportunity to narrow down that list. No parent in this room wants to take you to 3,000 different schools. So you have to kind of narrow it down some way. You want to learn about the differences within the institutions, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So there are private institutions, there are public institutions. You just learned about this SUNY system. Obviously, there are state universities in every state in the nation. The private institutions will, I would say, for the most part, tend to be smaller than some of the state institutions. Schools will range from probably a size of less than 500 students to a school like University of Central Florida, I think has something like 65,000 students. So you can really go from very, very small to the size of Schenectady, 60,000 people. Private institutions typically are institutions where the mission of the institution is developed by the school. They're, the board of trustees, the president, the faculty. And one tuition rate applies to all students, whether you are in state or out of state. Public institutions obviously will vary. They typically will have their mission and be subsidized by the state, and they will have a different tuition whether you're an in-state student or an out-of-state student. I just want to explain the difference between a college and a university. Union College, for instance, is a strictly undergraduate school, so we only offer bachelor's degree programs. Typically, universities are schools that will offer both bachelor's, master's, and maybe doctoral programs. So that's a pretty good sense. A lot of universities will have colleges within the universities, so if you are looking for a particular academic program. You may be applying to a university, but you'll apply to the college within the university, so an engineering program within a larger institution. So you want to know what the schools will offer and actually what you'll be applying into. So do you have to make that decision as you're submitting your application, what college you are going to apply into at that school? Or will it be something like a Union where you apply to Union, and once you're at Union, then you decide on what sort of academic program that you want? So there are differences, and you should certainly ask those questions. I mentioned the size, so that's something that as a student you have to consider. Are you someone who enjoys small classes, enjoys getting to know your professors, enjoys having a lot of classroom discussion in your classes? Or are you someone who would prefer to be in an auditorium like this, where you can sit in the back of the room and not fear that a professor's going to call you to ask and answer a question? Some people love to kind of have that anonymity in your academic program, and other people thrive on being engaged and involved with the discussion. And so that's typically what it will differ from a small school to a medium school to a large school. Now, having said that, I will tell you that my daughter attends a state school, not in New York, but a different state system. And most of her classes have been 20 to 25 students. So I'm not going to say it's exclusive that if you're at a large school, you're going to have all large classes, but it's a question that as you're looking at schools, you're going to want to ask, what's the average class size? Will I get to know my professors? Will I have a particular professor who will be my advisor? Will there be people that I can go turn to and they'll know me? So you just have to kind of think about what's important to you in the classroom setting. Other things you'll want to consider. Obviously, if you are a junior in school and you have a pretty good sense of what you're interested in studying, you'll be able to kind of narrow your list down right away, because you'll say, okay, I want biomedical engineering, so I'm going to look at schools that have biomedical engineering. That's great. You might be able to narrow your list down through the academic programs that you're interested in. I would have to say that my oldest daughter, who's now well out of college, had no idea what she wanted to major in. And so we could not narrow her list down at all based on that. And so that was not helpful. She eventually decided what she wanted to do, but it wasn't until well after she was in college. But anyway, you'll be wanting to look at that and making sure that if you have a particular area of academic interest, that the schools that you're looking at offer those academic interests. You may want to consider if you want any sort of religious affiliation in the school. Marcia mentioned, you have a great group of schools within the Capital District that you can look at very easily. So if you are someone who is thinking that you would like to go to a Catholic school, you could go and visit Siena and see what that has to offer versus a school like Union that doesn't have any religious affiliation. So that's another question that you'll have to ask yourself what you would like. You'll also want to ask yourself how different diversity issues are important to you. Do you want to go to an institution where everyone is from a local area, and so you might not necessarily meet people from other places in the country or the world? Or do you want that experience of being in an environment where a majority of the students are not from the local area, that you have 10, 15, 20% of the students who are international, bringing different perspectives into the classroom? You'll also want to think about, the ethnic diversity of the school, the socioeconomic diversity of the school. And these are all things that you can find on websites, or if you visit the school, ask questions. But these are all things that you should be considering. The other things that you would probably want to ask or consider are different out-of-class experiences. Marcia mentioned some that the SUNY offers, but if you're someone who really would like to study abroad, well, you want to make sure that you're going to an institution where they have a lot of options for that. Whether you are majoring in engineering or majoring in French or majoring in art, you'll want those experiences, and so you're going to want to ask those questions. If you're someone who has an interest in an area where you think an internship or a co-op opportunity will be an important thing, again, that's the type of thing that you want to ask when you're looking at schools. Are you someone who is interested in research? 75% of the students at Union conduct research at some point during their 4 years. This is hands-on research where you'll be working with a faculty member. Some students will be really excited about those opportunities. Other students want nothing to do with them. And so those are questions that you'll also want to ask the schools. Other things, location. Are you someone who likes big cities? Are you someone who likes to be out in the country? Are you a skier, so you want to be close to the mountains? Are you someone who wants to have access to a city but not live in a city? So those are things that you can consider. How far away from home do you want to be? Are you a student who wants to be able to get home pretty frequently? Are you coming from a family who doesn't mind jumping in the car and driving 6 hours to see you? Are you someone who definitely wants to be home every Thanksgiving? Because if you go across the country, you may not be able to do that. So these are all things that you want to consider. Sometimes parents will kind of set like, okay, we'll do a 3-hour limit. The wonderful thing coming from the Capital District is a 3-hour limit will have you looking at 1,000 different schools. Between Boston, New York, and New York State, Vermont, New England, there are a lot of schools out there, so it's not going to narrow your choices too much. Do you want the opportunity to travel? I mean, sometimes it's said that college is a great time to experience a different part of the country. Because as a student, you're going to an area, but you're not out there alone. You're not having to worry about your rent. You're not having to worry about your next meal because you're in this kind of setting on a college campus. But if that's not something that you want to experience, then you can obviously stay closer to home. You want to think of your academic fit, and certainly this is where Naviance will be very helpful. This is where your college counselors will be very helpful, knowing you as a student, your academic profile, and what might fit. We live in a society where rankings are really important. I'm sure you're all aware of all the different organizations that rank colleges. And they can be somewhat helpful. I mean, it will give you some sense of schools that have specific academic programs that might be very strong. But I just want to say that most students, you don't need to go to a top-ranked school in order to be a successful person in life. If you ever look at the listing of colleges and universities where the top, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies come from, they're not all going to the top 10 schools in the country. They're having these experiences, the research, the opportunities to study abroad at various colleges, and they're making the most of what opportunities they have at the colleges. So rankings are a place to start, but don't only form your list based on rankings in various magazines and newspapers and things like that. You'll probably want to have a mixture of schools on your list that you kind of hear about, the reaches, the sure bets, or the safety schools, and then the possible schools that you will get in. Because you'll want to have a mix. You want to form a list where you will have schools that, yes, you want to attend, but you also have a good sense of whether you will or that you will get into some of the schools that you are applying to. Marcia mentioned a little about how schools will evaluate your application. I just wanted to add a couple different things. Obviously, your transcript is very important, the grades and the rigor of the classes. Have they chosen classes for senior year yet? Yes, they have. Okay, you've chosen your classes for senior year. So I hope that this will not force a rush to the college counseling office tomorrow, but it's important to keep that rigor up through all 4 years of school. Many of you probably have taken honors courses or maybe AP classes, and the hardest thing for us in the admissions business is that when we look at a senior schedule, all of a sudden the student has decided, oh, I think I'll come in late and I'll leave early and I'll take my English and I'll take the government and economics that I have to take, and then I'm not trying to take any other classes senior year. Let me tell you, competitive colleges will not like to see that. We want to see that you are taking 5 academic classes all 4 years of high school. So most of the time, students will be taking English, history, a language, science, and math. But we also understand that sometimes by the time you're a senior, you may not be a math person, so you may not want to take math, calculus in your senior year, but you are a language person, so you want to double up on your languages in your senior year. That's great. It's still taking 5 academic subjects. So make sure your academic program kind of stays with you all 4 years. With testing, we are a test-optional school, and there are probably 800 schools now across the country that are test-optional. So if you're a student who doesn't necessarily test well on a Saturday morning and your SATs or your ACT scores are not a good indication of who you are as a student, then you might want to start looking at some of these test-optional schools. There is a website called fairtest.org, and that will give you the full list. Some of the schools that are test optional may require that you write an additional essay. They may require that you've had an interview. They may require that you submit a graded paper. There are all sorts of ways that schools are test optional. At Union, we're simply test optional. You either check the box on the Common App or the Coalition app saying, I want my testing considered, or I do not want my testing considered, and there's nothing else the students need to do. So that's something to consider. The other thing with testing, you might hear something called superscoring testing. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. Superscoring testing just means that if you take the SATs or the ACTs more than one time, we are going to take the highest subscores of the test. So let's say you take the SATs probably in May, and then you take them again next September. We will take the highest critical reading. It's not called critical reading anymore. It's called evidence-based reading. You can tell that I haven't taken these tests. Evidence-based reading, I just look at the scores. And math. So we'll take the highest evidence-based reading and the highest math score no matter how many times you take the test. We do the same thing with ACT. And what you'll want to do is, as you're looking at colleges and as you're visiting colleges, make sure you're asking that question. Do you superscore, or how do you look at the testing? Some schools will also require the SAT-2 subject tests. Union's not one of those, but you'll also want to ask that question, and you'll get those answers pretty easily. We will require guidance counselor recommendations, so I will encourage all students to get to know, or have your counselors get to know you, so that they can write a meaningful recommendation to us. Most schools will also ask for 1 or 2 teacher recommendations. And so you might want to start even thinking about the teachers you have now, if any of them you feel you would like to write a recommendation. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to ask them at the end of this year. Some of the teachers appreciate when they can write some of these letter of recommendations during the summer, so they're not inundated in the fall. We'll be looking at your activities. We want to see that you are the type of student who can balance your time between your academics and other things going on in your life. And those will include things both in school but also through the community. We will read your essay, but we'll worry about that a little later in this academic year or by next year. And some schools will also be looking at demonstrated interest, which just means that if you have an opportunity to visit, if you have an opportunity to meet with an admissions person when they come to your school, if the school recommends interviews, I would suggest you interview with that school. Very honestly, as a student from Guilderland, what do you think it tells us if you are applying to Union and you've never visited Union's campus or Albany's campus? My guess is we're saying, oh, they must not really be interested because we're 15 minutes away and they could probably get here at some point between their junior year and senior year. So demonstrated interest comes into play for a lot of schools, not all schools, and it's another valid question to ask as you're kind of researching schools either on the web or if you're meeting with admissions people. There are different admissions plans. I won't get too into this because you're not applying yet, but just so you know, there are early decision plans, which is a binding agreement on the part of the student. So as you go through this process, if you know for sure that this is, you want to apply to Union, that's the school you really want to go to, early decision's a great opportunity. There's early action, which is allowing you to apply early. You get responses earlier, but it's not a binding program. So you can apply to a school early action and then other schools early regular decision. There are sometimes deadlines for special programs at schools, so you'll also want to make sure that you're noting those. An example at Union, for instance, is we have an accelerated medical program with Albany Med. That deadline is November 15th, much earlier than our regular deadline of January 15th. So if you're looking at any sort of special programs, or if you're looking into a program that is extremely competitive, nursing programs or things like that, they might have earlier deadlines than the greater college, and so you just want to make sure that you keep those in your head. Time to visit. I think, we mentioned the number of different schools that you have in this local area. I would really encourage you to use us as guinea pigs to visit campuses. Schools have information sessions. They offer tours every day. Many schools will have open houses. When you're on break in 3 weeks or so, we'll be very busy having visitors come to our campus. So we have an engineering open house, we have a regular open house, we have information sessions, we have tours. We start interviewing juniors in May, and so you have all summer to come for an interview if you would like. And all schools have many, many different opportunities to visit, but I would really encourage you to do those types of things. College fairs, a great way to just gain general information about a school. There will be a larger fair at HBCC later in the spring. You have your own program. You have your own program here in Guilderland. So, take advantage of that. Those are great times just to collect information and get general questions answered, and it will help you to start narrowing down that list. And that's all and enjoy the process, and I'm handing over to you.
Yes. Thank you. So now that we know the 4-year public and private process, we're going to need some help paying for it. So Steve, we're looking to you for some good advice.
Thank you. My name is Steve. I head up the financial aid office at the College of St. Rose, and I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the financial aid process. How many people have heard about the financial aid or are dreading to file the paperwork for the financial aid process? Yeah? Yeah. It's not as hard as you think, I promise you, okay? The first step in the financial aid process would be filing the FAFSA form, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Has everyone heard of the FAFSA? Okay. You can start filing, you'll be filing the 2019-20 FAFSA form starting October 1st, 2018. Okay, that's the first time you can file that form. You'll be using, again, 2017 tax information. In your folder, or in the back of the packet, there's this checklist sheet here. To file the FAFSA form online, you need to have what's called an FSA user ID and password, okay? Build a file, not only for admissions applications and information, but also build one for financial aid. Because you'll be filing these financial aid forms 4 different times. First year, second year, third year, fourth year. And if you go on to graduate school, a couple more times. But you're going to be doing it once a year. Put it in that folder because it's not going to change. A parent needs an FSA user ID and password, and so does a student. You could file for one right now if you wanted to. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete, okay? You can write it down in this sheet, put it in that folder. Because most people file this FAFSA form electronically, about 95%. 5%, you can still file the paper FAFSA if you like to. On the back of this sheet, too, lists everything that you're going to need, Social Security cards, all of that. The FAFSA form is about 100 and some odd questions. Most of those questions are demographic. What's your name? What's your ID number? Or what's your Social Security number? Where do you live? Do you want to live on campus? Do you want to live off campus? Are you interested in work study? Are you going to be a first-year student? Going to be a sophomore, junior, senior? Those are the type of questions they're going to ask, okay? So most of them are relatively easy. I encourage students to be involved in this process with your parents because this is your education. You may be borrowing money, we'll talk about in a little while. So you need to know about your financial aid and how to file for this financial aid. The FAFSA form should only take you about a half an hour to 40 minutes to fill it out your first time, okay? If you have all your information, all your tax paperwork in front of you and all the required paperwork or information that's on the back of that form, should only take about a half an hour or 40 minutes to complete. Again, you're going to complete it each year. Once you get to the end, I guess I'll say this. The biggest mistakes that people make on the FAFSA form that will slow down the process, it's going to be the student's name when they ask, what's your name? It's the student's name and Social Security number. Please have your Social Security cards out when you file the FAFSA form. Because what will happen is once you submit the FAFSA form, they're going to match your name, your date of birth, and your Social Security number against the Social Security Administration. If you're off even one digit on your Social Security number, it's not going to make that match and it's going to slow things down. That's for the parent and the student. Also, when you get to the tax information section, there's two different ways you can fill it. You can just go into the FAFSA form. It's very helpful to have little question marks after each question. What's your adjusted gross income? You don't know, gee, what line do I go to? You click on the little help tab. It will tell you exactly what line to go on to pull out that information. However, what I recommend is they have what's called the IRS data retrieval. You select that option, it will bring you back over to the IRS. You'll put in your name, how you filed your taxes, and your address, and most of that taxable income information is going to come directly back into the FAFSA form. So most of that taxable tax information will come in directly from the IRS. It's more accurate and it takes you less time, so please, if you're able to, use that data retrieval. Again, know what the deadlines are for the different colleges. I helped my niece and nephew probably about 2 years ago go to college and apply. So what you do is you just build a spreadsheet, know what the application dates are. Okay, Union's this date, St. Rose is this date, SUNY Albany is this date. You know, I need to get my applications in by then. Also then what you do is you find out, well, when's the FAFSA due? Like, we have a deadline of December 1st. Union may have November 1st. SUNY may have January 1st. You put down what the deadline is, and you meet the deadline. So if the FAFSA form, if between us 3 different colleges, Union's the first and at November 1st, you file the FAFSA form by November 1st, and you know that all the colleges got it on time. So it takes a little while, but build that spreadsheet so you know, so you don't miss a deadline. With financial aid, and if you miss an application deadline, you know, there's consequences. But if you hit those deadlines, there are certain types of aid that's limited, and I'll talk to you about that in a few minutes. So hitting the deadlines from the college makes you potentially eligible for aid. If you miss those deadlines, you might miss out on some financial aid. So you've completed the FAFSA form, again, which takes about 30 to 40 minutes to do. The next thing would be you're going to get a congratulations page. Congratulations, you have filed the FAFSA form. So it's a good feeling. How many people are going to be applying to more than 10 different colleges? Yes? Okay. FAFSA form, you can only put 10 different colleges on. So each college has a code, so you don't need to send anything to us. As long as our college code is on that FAFSA form, we're going to get that information. What you do is you file the FAFSA form with those first 10 colleges. You wait about 3 to 4 days. You go back into the FAFSA form. Let's say you're applying to 12. You take off 2 colleges off the FAFSA and put those 2 new college codes in. That will ensure that all 12 will receive your FAFSA form. But because we're all from the state of New York, there's going to be about partway down on that congratulations page of the FAFSA form, it says, do you want to complete your state application? It'll be highlighted in blue. You're going to click that link. You're going to be linked over to what's called New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. You're going to file what's called the TAP application, the Tuition Assistance Program. New York State students going to New York State schools, whether public or private, you might qualify for the TAP app, for a TAP award. However, if you don't file the application, you'll never get that award. So it links you right over there. You'll need your 2017 tax information. Again, it'll take a few minutes. Again, on the front of this form, the student will need to create a username and password, just the student this time. But again, write it down on the sheet of paper, then put it in your folder. Because again, you'll be using it each year you apply. You fill out that application. Again, it should take you about 20 minutes. So we're talking about an hour to hour and 15 minutes to complete both of these forms to be submitted. So that's the federal and state. The next is some private colleges or maybe even public colleges, not only do they require the FAFSA form, they may require what's called the CSS profile form, or they may have their own internal application to gather additional information. Again, when you're researching the colleges that you want to apply to and you create that spreadsheet, you want to see what do they require. We only require the FAFSA form, the free application for student aid. But there might be a college that they want you to file the FAFSA and the CSS profile form. Now, the CSS profile form gathers more information, but it's not free. There is a charge to send that to different schools. But know those deadlines too and make sure you meet those deadlines. Every school that gives out federal financial aid has to have what we call a net price calculator. You usually can find it either on the financial aid webpage or an admissions webpage. You can put in your information, grades, or financial information, and you can get a snapshot of what it might cost you to go to that school. So if you come to our website, we'll ask some different questions and things of that nature about your academics and then about your financials. And you plug that in, takes about 15 minutes to complete. You will get kind of like a pre-read, like it would cost approximately this amount of money to go to the college. So again, most colleges have that on their websites. So you can do some research not only when you're researching what college might be the best fit for you, you can also see, again, what it might cost you to go to that school. Again, until you actually get admitted and file all the financial aid paperwork, that's only a pre-read. That doesn't mean that that's exactly what you're going to receive, but it might be a good estimate of what you should receive. Common questions on the FAFSA form. If we don't think we were going to file or we're qualified for anything from the federal government or any money in general, should I file the FAFSA form? Answer to that question is yes, you should at least do it your first year. You don't know what you're going to qualify for until you actually apply. And if you actually want to access the federal student loans, whether it be parent or student, you have to file the FAFSA form to do that as well. For students, they say, well, I'm 18 now. Do I need my parents' information on the FAFSA form? The answer to that question is absolutely. Until a student reaches the age of 24, they're married, they have dependents, they're a veteran, they're a graduate or professional student, or if they're an orphan or ward of the court, they're going to need, it's not only the student income asset information on the FAFSA form, it's also a parent's income and asset information on the FAFSA form. In cases where there's a divorce or separation, who do I put on that FAFSA form? It's whoever the student lives with or gets more than half support from. So let's say I live with my mom more than half time, then that's who I'd put on the FAFSA form. It can change year to year, so let's say my first year is with my mom and then I live with my dad the next year, then I can put my dad on the FAFSA form for my second year at school. If it truly is 50-50, the government tells you, and you will read in the FAFSA form, you put down the parent that makes more money. That's what they'll tell you to do. And if you do have any questions, just contact a financial aid office and we can help you. Another question, so when you get to the parent, when parents on the FAFSA form, you do not put in your home value, okay? The questions that they're gonna ask, when you file the FAFSA form, what's the current value of your cash savings and checking on that day that you file it, so do your best estimate. The next will be investments in other real estate, and you do not put in the value of like a pension plan, 401k, 403b plan, that does not go there. But let's say I just had stock outside, I'd put whatever the value of that stock is that's outside of one of those plans. If you own a rental property or second house, you would put in the value of that second house, the mortgage minus anything you still owe on it. Does anyone own a business? Do you have over 100 employees? Anyone have under over 100 employees? Anyone? Okay. If you have a business, you only put down that value if you have over 100 employees, so that knocks most people out of it. Does anyone own a farm? Okay. If you own a farm, okay. Do you live on that farm? Then you don't need to put the value of your farm on that. It's only as if you if you live off the farm. So you wouldn't need to put that there. So the answer to that question would be 0. So once you file the FAFSA form, you'll get back a confirmation from the federal government. It's called the student aid report. Just look over that student aid report again. Common mistakes that we see, you put an extra 0 on something. Your adjusted gross income is $40,000, but all of a sudden you put an extra 0 on it, and now it's $400,000. You're going to get a vastly different answer to what you're going to receive from the federal government or a college. But again, it's fixable. Just go back into the FAFSA form and change that data element that's wrong, okay? Again, because you have our college code on it, we'll get that information. You don't need to send anything to us. Again, you also get a confirmation from New York State that you filed the TAP application, okay? You also may get selected for what's called the verification process. Approximately about 30% of all FAFSA forms get selected for the verification process. What that means is that the government's going to make you confirm all the information that's on the FAFSA form. So if you've applied to 12 different schools, guess what? You're going to get 12 different letters from those schools saying, hey, we want your tax information, we want your W-2s, we want a verification worksheet. If you use the data retrieval that I talked about, the way to import your information right into the FAFSA form, it's much easier. You just need to fill out a verification form and send in W-2s. If you didn't do that, then you're going to have to go out to the IRS and request what's called a tax account transcript. Get it from the IRS and then send it into the colleges. Again, if you get selected for this process, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't take that long to complete it. Talk to a college financial aid office and we can help you through that process. And again, if we're looking at FAFSA forms, if I think someone's filed the FAFSA form incorrectly, the college can also select someone for the verification process just to make sure that everything's been filled out correctly. Next, every college has a different cost. We bill the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance includes direct costs, tuition fees, room and board. Indirect costs, books, supplies, personal expenses, travel to get to the college and back home a couple different times a semester. So our cost of attendance is higher than a SUNY school, okay? So you take that cost of attendance minus any, what you call your expected family contribution that you'll get from the FAFSA form or from the CSS profile, and that will determine your financial need, okay? So once you've been accepted, you filed the FAFSA form, and if you've required the profile form or any other forms from another college, you'll get a financial aid package from the school. That financial aid package will have any merit-based scholarships you might receive from a school based on grades, any need-based aid from the FAFSA form from the college. It will also have, if you qualify for a federal Pell Grant from the government, that's the largest grant from the federal government that comes out of the FAFSA form. If you may also receive what's called an SEOG grant. It's another grant from the federal government. It usually goes to Pell Grant students only. It's based on need. And also any other grants. We give out need-based grants based off that FAFSA form based on your financial need. So that would be in that award letter as well that comes out to you. You also have the ability, remember how I said at certain times the government only gives a certain amount of money out to schools? Well, work study is one of those programs where we don't get enough money. I don't think any college gets enough money to cover all their students for work study through the federal work study program. So the students who hit our deadlines are more likely going to receive a work study award. So if I said by December 1st I wanted all the FAFSA forms in, people who file in January and February might not have access to those federal work study funds because we need to give them out. The school must give those funds out based on need, but on a first-come, first-served basis. So the students who file the FAFSA forms first and get those in by our deadlines have access to those programs, okay? On the FAFSA form, there is a question, are you interested in federal work study? Even if you're not sure whether you want federal work study or not, answer yes to that question. When I do a financial aid package, I don't look at that question on the FAFSA form. I just kind of give it out if someone's eligible for it and they hit my deadlines, I give it to them. But there are colleges that look at that, and if you say no, even though you might be eligible, they're just going to pass you by and say, I'm going to give it to someone who wants it. So please answer yes to that question. You can always say you don't want it in the future, okay? If you do not receive work study and you're still interested in it in your financial aid, call the financial aid office and talk to us. We can put you on a wait list maybe or explain why you did not receive it. And again, work study doesn't usually come off the bill. What it's there for is to help students with money so they're not always calling you, the parents, saying, hey, can I have some money? They also get valuable work experience most times. Like some of our students work with our music professor or in the science labs. There are jobs such as checking IDs at the athletic center too. I mean, it's a wide range of programs. The next thing would be, and I'll go in detail in just a few minutes about, would be federal loans would be on that award letter as well. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The next two items that I want to bring your attention to, one is called the Excelsior Scholarship. If you go to a SUNY school, they just started this program this year, and what's called the Enhanced Tuition Award for private schools. Okay, all SUNY and CUNY schools have to participate in the Excelsior program. When you come to school in 2019-20, if your adjusted gross income when you add the parents' adjusted gross income and the students' adjusted gross income, if it's $125,000 or less, you may qualify for this Excelsior program to help you pay for college. Okay? The Enhanced Tuition Award has that same thing. It's $125,000 or less when you start school. Okay? There are restrictions on it. You have to, if you receive these awards, you have to, for 4 years, you have to live and work in the state of New York for 4 years after you graduate. If not, it becomes a loan and you have to repay the state. It's 0% interest rate over 10 years. You actually have to continue, you have to pass and earn 30 credits each year and have usually a 2.0 or better. That's usually good academic standing. And you have to apply for this award each year. Now, it's not guaranteed yet, but I don't think that there hasn't been anyone that I've heard of that's been turned down for the Excelsior or the ETA program that's qualified. However, if there's more students than the funding that's available, it goes to a lottery system. Returning students are given preference over new students. Okay? This information comes directly from New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. Read it. With the ETA program, the Enhanced Tuition Award, that's for private schools. That's a private school side one. A school has to actually opt into the program. With Excelsior, SUNYs have to participate. There's no getting around it. With the ETA award. So there's only about 30 schools that did it this year. We were one of them. But I think the due date this coming year is February 26th. All the private schools in New York have got to say either they're going to participate in the program or they're not going to participate in the program. And again, if you have questions, you can just go to the New York State Higher Education Services website. You'll see this is a nice sheet to talk to you more about these different programs. So once you do get your financial aid awards, you really need to sit down and compare them side by side. The next slide just kind of shows comparison of College A, College B, and College C. You know, what is the cost minus, you want to take away and look at your grants first. Like, so what is it that after all the grants have been applied to the bill and all my build fees, what's that bottom line going to be? And then if I decide to take out loans, that can help you reduce your net costs. So really kind of take a look at it after grants and scholarships, because loans, even though you may not need to pay them now, you're going to need to pay them back in 4.5 years once you graduate. The federal loans that a student is eligible for, and everything I say right now is based on, the government could change it next year or even tomorrow if they wanted to. A student can borrow up to $5,500 through what we call the Stafford, the William D. Ford Stafford Loan Program. If you have financial need of at least $3,500 or more, that loan will be, your $3,500 will be subsidized, which means the government's going to pay for the interest while you're in school. 6 months after you graduate, you become less than a half-time student, you start paying back the principal and interest. Currently, the interest rate on that is 4.4%. The government changes this interest rate every July 1st. So the students who borrowed this year at 4.4%, it's fixed in for the life of the loan all the way through until they pay for it. Next year, it'll be locked in at whatever the rate is for that year. So they do change each year. So if you took Stafford loans out for 4 years, you're probably going to have 4 different loans at 4 different interest rates. The government does charge a very small origination fee. It's 1.069%. So you'll borrow $3,500, but the college receives about $30 less. So if you receive the full $3,500 subsidized loan, you're eligible for what we call a $2,000 unsubsidized Stafford loan. Same interest rate, same origination fee, but the difference is once that money is dispersed to the college, interest starts accruing on that loan. You have the ability to pay for it while the student's in school, but there's no requirement that you do. If you're not making any payments on the interest, it's going to be $2,000 plus whatever the interest rate is over 4.5 years. Okay. These loans can also usually are based on a 10-year repayment once a student graduates. If the student goes right on to graduate school or PhD, as long as they're in a degree granting program more than half time, these loans stay in deferment and they wouldn't need to pay for them until they're done their next degree. The other loan, it's for a parent. It's called the Parent Plus loan. You as a parent can borrow up to the cost of education minus any other grants or loans your son or daughter receives. Again, the interest rate changes every year. This year, that interest rate is 7% fixed on that loan. There is a higher origination fee on that loan. It's 4.265% as we stand here today. So you take out $10,000, they're going to keep about $425 of that loan as a processing fee. Again, you usually start paying back 60 days after the second disbursement, which in an academic year is usually like February or March of the year. However, the government does allow you to defer principal or principal and interest until after the student graduates, but if you're not paying either the principal or interest, it's going to take you longer to pay off that loan. Other ways to pay off that remaining balance that you may or may not have. If you do still have a remaining balance, how do you pay for room and board or any of those other fees? We talked about the PLUS loan. Private alternative loans. Have people heard of private alternative loans through a private bank? Again, the student would need to be 18, and they would need a parent as a cosigner. Just be careful on those loans. Some are variable, some are fixed rate. Just be careful of what those interest rates are, and especially be careful if it's a variable rate. Most colleges offer payment plans where you can spread amounts over 6 or 5 months each semester to spread out. They're interest-free usually, so you don't, once you're done paying, you can do that as well. Again, just be very careful about private alternative loans. They can have pretty high rates at times. Again, apply for any scholarships you think you might be eligible for. Talk to your local guidance counselor's office. Do searches online. Again, all this paperwork that you're filling out for financial aid is just a snapshot in time, and now we're pretty much using 2 years back. So if you do have changes to your income, I lost my job, I took a new job, there's something that's coming up that's affecting your ability to pay for college, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to talk to us in the financial aid office to see if we can make an adjustment to get you more aid either from the federal government or the institution. Okay? And I'll be around afterwards if there's questions. I know we're going to do a question and answer period, but if you have a specific question you don't feel like asking it in front of the whole group, I will stay back and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to open up to any questions you may have for either Steve, Marcia, or Susie. Any questions? Oh, yes, sir.
Question on the FAFSA form: has there ever been a data breach? I don't know the exact answer to that question. Here's an answer I do have. This year in 2017-18, the government is not letting you use the IRS data retrieval because of some type of breach they had. They will allow it in 18-19, so they fixed whatever problem that was, but in 17-18, no. I haven't heard of any other ones. I can't tell you if a school has had one, but that's the only thing that I know about right now. It is a lot of sensitive information. Absolutely it is. Mm-hmm.
One thing I would add is I know a lot of financial aid offices now are having some sort of way that you can, like a Dropbox type of thing, so you're not sending information through email, because that's what we always used to do. So there are kind of very secure places that you can drop your information.
Other questions? Yes.
How important do you guys weight honor classes over non-honor? Or, like a kid who takes Regents and gets a 98 versus a kid who takes honors and gets a 90?
For us, the rigor is important within reason. As our director always says, we want you to sleep and we want you to have a life outside of class, so we're not promoting go take 6 APs every year. But certainly the more rigorous classes are preparing you better for the level of work and the amount of writing and reading and discussion and perspective and things like that that you'll find in college classes. And so we feel like those students are better prepared.
Not really, pretty much the same. Sorry.
Any other questions? Okay, well, we thank you for your time. We did hand out evaluations, and on the table there's a box to put your evaluations in. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight, and travel safely.